Subscribe to LearnCap and hit the bell icon to get notified.
The next amendment in place of supply. Friends, there's a notification which is issued under section 13, subsection 13. To understand that notification, let's take an example. Now friends, let's say there's a foreign aircraft. Let's say there's an aircraft of Emirates. Let's say it comes to Delhi. And when it comes to Delhi, this aircraft wants to receive MRO services, that is maintenance, repair and overhaul services from a service provider who is located in Delhi. Fine. Let's say the agreed value is say 1 lakh rupees for carrying out this MRO services. Foreign airline, foreign aircraft Emirates comes to Delhi and on its brings its passengers, and while returning back, before going back, it wants to avail MRO services, that is maintenance, repair and overall services by a service provider who is located in Delhi. Let's say the agreed amount is 1 lakh. Two questions: what would be the place of supply? And second question is, what would be the nature of supply? Third question is whether this is a zero rated supply. What is the place of supply? What is the nature of supply? And whether it is a zero rated supply. Now friends, first, whether it is goods or services, please don't forget the sequence. The sequence is first find out whether it is goods or services, because if it is goods, the place of supply would come from section 10 and section 11. If it is services, the place of supply would come from section 12 and section 13. Now friends, this is a contract for services, so therefore you would get your place of supply from section 12 or from section 13. Now friends, as regards to section 12 is concerned, section 12 would apply only when the supplier and the recipient are from India. 13 would apply when either the supplier or the recipient, even if one among them are there outside India, section 13 would apply. Now friends, in this case, the supplier and recipient, both of them are not from India. One is from outside India, the service provider is from India, the recipient happens to be from outside India. So therefore, section 13 would give you the place of supply of these services. As regards to section 13 is concerned, in section 13, will it go into the general category? Now before deciding whether it goes into the general category or not, we have to check whether any subsection of section 13 is specifically covering this scenario. Now friends, if you have a look at section 13 subsection 3, therein it states that where the recipient of service is required to make the goods available to the supplier of service so that the supplier of service can perform the services on these goods, in that case the place of supply shall be the place of performance. Now whether our example is fitting into section 13 subsection 3, the answer is yes. You have a recipient of service who has to make the aircraft available to the supplier of service so that the supplier of service can provide maintenance, repair and overall services. So now friends, this is a case which is exactly fitting into 13 subsection 3 clause A. It is performance on goods. So what is the place of supply? The place of supply is going to be the place where the services are actually performed. Now friends, in this example, the services are performed in Delhi. The services are performed in Delhi. The place of supply happens to be Delhi. Now friends, second question is, what is the nature of supply? The second question is, what is the nature of supply? Now friends, as regards as nature of supply is concerned, we have to compare the location of supplier and the place of supply to find out the nature of supply. The location of supplier is located in Delhi. The place of supply is also Delhi. So the location of supplier and the place of supply, happens to be in same state. So therefore, it happens to be an intra-state supply. This happens to be an intra-state supply. So the nature of supply is intra-state supply. So therefore friends, what GST should be charged? It is going to be CGST plus Delhi's SGST needs to be charged. Now friends, the third question is whether this is a zero rated supply. Now friends, please understand, for a supply to be a zero rated supply, first it has to be an interstate supply. If a supply is not an interstate supply, forget the dream of a zero rated supply. So now friends, this is not a zero rated supply, because in case of zero rated supply, the place of supply should be outside India. That means when the question is whether this is a zero rated supply, means the question is asking you whether this is an export of service and can the benefit of zero rating be taken. Now friends, as regards the export of service is concerned, the supplier should be in India. In our example, yes, the supplier is in Delhi, agreed. The recipient should be outside India. Yes, the recipient is from outside India. The place of supply has to be outside India. Now friends, in this example, the place of supply according to section 13 subsection 3 clause A, the place of supply happens to be Delhi. The place of supply is not outside India. Since the place of supply is not outside India, it is not an interstate supply, and furthermore it is not an export of service because place of supply should be outside India for a service to qualify itself as an export of service. So whether the benefit of zero rated supplies can be taken, the answer is no. GST should be charged. What GST should be charged? CGST and Delhi GST should be charged. Assuming that even Emirates would pay the supplier in foreign currency. Assuming the other conditions are satisfied. Emirates pays the supplier in foreign currency. The supplier is from India. Recipient is from outside India. But just because the place of supply is in India, this service doesn't qualify to be a zero rated supply. Forget zero rated supply. This service doesn't even qualify to be an interstate supply. It is happening to conclude as an intrastate supply. Now friends, this service provider has a problem in this. This service provider has a problem in this because now friends, he tells that I have to, since my supply is not a zero rated supply, I have to charge him GST. I have to charge him Indian GST. Please understand, I would have to charge him Indian GST. Now friends, his issue is, the service provider tells, his issue is that internationally these type of transactions are regarded as export of service. Internationally, these type of transactions are regarded as an export of service. That means, let's suppose an Indian aircraft is going outside India. Let's say an Indian aircraft is going to Australia and their MRO services are being given to an Indian aircraft. Now, according to the Australian GST laws, this service, the service provider is from Australia, this service would be regarded as an export of service. So friends, now please understand, this service provider is telling you that this service internationally is recognized as an export of service. Now, what is the problem, friends? The problem is, please understand, if this service is internationally, if it is recognized as an export of service, the reverse of it will also be true. Internationally, for the other country, this would be regarded as an import of service. Internationally, for the other country, this service would be regarded as an import of service. Now, the service provider tells you the exact problem. He tells you, look, if you're treating this supply to be an intrastate supply, I would charge him CGST and Delhi's GST. And back there in his country, this service would be regarded as an import of service because his country is considering these transactions as international transactions of exports and imports. Now, this, please understand, India is considering this supply to be an intrastate supply. I have to charge him CGST and Delhi's GST. Back there in his country, this transaction would be regarded as an import of service. So therefore, in his country, he would have to pay GST under reverse charge mechanism. The single transaction internationally is getting taxed in two different countries. Over here, Indian government is also going to collect tax. Back there in his country is also going to collect the taxes, treating it to be an import of service. He would have to pay his value added tax under reverse charge mechanism. So now friends, there is a situation of double taxation which is arising. So friends, this service providers went to the government and told them that kindly consider this service to be an zero rated supply, make this as an export of service. So now friends, if you want to make this as an export of service, assuming all the other conditions are satisfied, supply from India, yes. Recipient from outside India, yes. Amount received in forex, yes. Both of them not distinct persons, yes. The only problem was place of supply. So he requested that you please change the place of supply from it being to Delhi to the location of recipient. So friends, now the government told him, why are you getting bothered? Why are you getting bothered? Did you have a look? Did you have a look into the proviso to 13 subsection 3? Please have a look at proviso to 13 subsection 3. Are you not getting covered by the proviso to 13 subsection 3? So let's have a look at proviso to 13 subsection 3. So this is 13 subsection 3A, the second proviso. The second proviso tells you that provided further that means the basic body of 13.3a tells you the place of supply shall be the place of performance. The place of supply for performance on goods, it shall be the place of performance. Proviso is creating an exception. Now, please read the proviso. The proviso tells you, provided further that nothing contained in this clause shall apply in the case of services supplied in respect of goods which are temporarily imported into India for repairs or any other treatment or process and are exported after repairs, treatment or process without being put to any other use in India other than that which is required for such repairs, treatments or processes. So now friends, the government tells that are you not covered under second proviso to 13 subsection 3 clause A? Is the aircraft imported into India? Yes. Are MRO services being done on it? Yes. Now, what do you mean by aircraft being imported into India? What do you mean by import? Friends, import simply means bringing goods into India from a place outside India. That is all the definition of import. Bringing goods into India from a place outside India. Is this aircraft coming from a place outside India into India? The answer is yes. Now friends, is the aircraft being imported? Yes. Now MRO services are being done? Yes. Thereafter it is going back to its origin country? Yes. Are you not covered by the proviso? Now friends, this service provider tells, his reply to the government is, please have a careful look at the wordings. The wordings are, provided further that nothing contained in this clause shall apply in the case of services supplied in respect of goods which are temporarily imported into India for repairs. 13(3)(a) second proviso tells you aircraft should be imported for the purpose of repairs. Now friends, did this aircraft come to India for repairs? The answer is no. That aircraft had bought certain passengers and before going it wants to get MRO services done. So now friends, this import did not happen for repairs. So now this service provider tells, today you're telling me like this, tomorrow your own department officials will start litigating that did this aircraft come to India for repairs? No, then you're not covered by the second proviso, because if you are covered by the second proviso, 13(3) is not applicable to you. Go to the general category. The place of supply happens to be the location of recipient, which is the other country which is there outside India. It would qualify to be an export of service. But tomorrow your department officials would tell me that I am not covered by the second proviso. That means I remain under 13(3)(a. The place of supply would still be Delhi because this aircraft is not imported for repairs. So now friends, the government understood this problem. So then the government asked, okay, you tell me a solution. What am I supposed to do? This service provider takes the government to 13 subsection 13. This service provider tells, under 13 subsection 13, you have got the power to change the place of supply. Please read 13 subsection 13. In order to prevent double taxation. In order to prevent double taxation. Where is the double taxation over here? There is a double taxation. Internationally, this transaction is regarded as an export and import. If I charge in India GST over here, back there in his country, it is treated as an import of service. He would have to pay GST under reverse charge mechanism in his country. It becomes double taxation internationally. So in order to prevent double taxation or non-taxation of a supply of service or for the uniform application of rules, the government shall have the power to notify any description of service or circumstances in which the place of supply shall be the place of effective use and enjoyment of a service. So this service provider tells under 13 subsection 13, you issue a notification, shift this place of supply to the location of recipient. So now friends, under 13 subsection 13, notification 4/2019, notification is there. Here it reads you, supply of maintenance, repair or overall services. This is your MRO services in respect of aircrafts, aircraft engines and other aircraft components or parts. If these services are supplied to a person for use in the course of furtherance of business. Our example covered over here, the answer is yes. Then the place of supply of services shall be the location of recipient of service. Then the place of supply of service would be the location of recipient of service. Now friends, in our example, coming back to our example, the only point which was preventing this transaction from being called as an export of service was the place of supply happened to be Delhi. Now friends, by this notification, the place of supply is shifted from Delhi to outside India. Now, if assuming the other conditions are satisfied, that means if the forex is being received, this would be regarded as an export of service from India. This Delhi service provider would not charge him any GST because now this is a zero rated supply. Now this happens to be a zero rated supply. I'm sure you're able to follow this, why this notification is being issued. Now friends, don't stop over here. As regards as this notification is concerned, it is solving two problems. One is the problem of the Indian service provider with regard to the foreign aircrafts, which we have already discussed. When an Indian service provider is providing MRO services to a foreign aircraft that did not qualify to be a zero rated supply because the place of supply happens to be the place of performance. So therefore, this issue was solved. Now friends, there's another issue. There's another issue which also is being addressed by the very same notification. Let's take an example. Now friends, the example is, let's say there is an Indian service provider. Please understand. there is an Indian service provider. Two problems are solved by the same notification. We are trying to see what is the second issue which is being solved. There is an Indian service provider who's providing MRO services, let's say to an Indian aircraft. Let's say to an Indian aircraft, these services are being provided. Fine. Now friends, question, what is the place of supply and what is the nature of supply? Let's say Indian service provider located in Delhi, aircraft also Delhi. MRO services being provided. Friends, please remember the sequence. To find out the place of supply, first you have to freeze whether it is goods or whether it is services. In our example, it is services. So the place of supply would be given by section 12 or by section 13. Now friends, the service provider and the service recipient are from India. Service provider and the service recipient are from India. So therefore, the place of supply would come from section 12. Now, as regards to section 12 is concerned, you do not have a specific provision for these MRO services. So you go into the general category. In general category, the place of supply, if the recipient is a registered person, it happens to be the location of such registered person. So now friends, as regards as the aircraft is concerned, it is registered in Delhi. So the place of supply happens to be Delhi. Now friends, what is the nature of supply? Location of supplier Delhi, place of supply also Delhi. It happens to be an intra-state supply. It happens to be an intra-state supply and CGST and Delhi SGST is going to be charged. So far it's so good. Now what problem did this Indian service provider have? Everything is clear. The problem which this Indian service provider is reporting is, he tells that friends, if this Indian aircraft, let's say it goes to Australia. Please understand, if this Indian aircraft is going to Australia and there if it is receiving MRO services, maintenance, repair and overall services, what would be the treatment? Now friends, the treatment would be, when this Delhi aircraft is going to Australia and getting MRO services done, please understand, we already discussed internationally these transactions are regarded as an export of service. So this Australian service provider who's providing MRO services to this Indian aircraft would not charge any Australian GST, because according to the Australia VAT laws, this happens to be an export of service. Internationally, it is regarded as an export of service. Agreed. What's the issue? The issue is, this Indian service provider is telling, the issue is, internationally this is regarded as an export of service. So this Indian aircraft, when it is going to Australia and getting MRO services done, that Australian service provider is not charging any GST. It is coming totally tax free. But is the Indian government's GST law treating this as an import of service for this tax to be paid under reverse charge mechanism? If the answer is yes, then there is a level playing field. If he is going to Australia, there it is tax free. He comes to India, the same transaction is treated as an import of service and GST is liable to be paid under reverse charge mechanism. So therefore, this Indian aircraft, whether he gets serviced from Australia in India, when he comes back, he has to pay GST under reverse charge mechanism. Whether he gets these MRO services, if he is getting it from India, the Indian supplier would charge him GST under forward charge mechanism. There would be a level playing field. If the Indian aircraft goes to Australia, according to Australian laws, this is an export of service, agreed. It comes back to India. If Indian government is treating this transaction as an import of service, GST is liable to be paid under RCM. So therefore, in India, it would pay GST. Alternative which this aircraft has got is, it could take services of MRO from an Indian service provider itself. So this Indian service provider would naturally charge CGST and Delhi SGST as we had discussed. So there is going to be a level playing field if these services are regarded as import of service by the Indian government. Now friends, the question which we have to analyze is, are these services regarded as an import of service according to the Indian GST law? Now friends, let's analyze that. Now the service provider is located outside India. What do you mean by import of service? You have to satisfy three conditions: service provider outside India, service recipient inside India, place of supply inside India. If these three conditions are satisfied, it is an import of service. GST is liable to be paid under reverse charge mechanism. Now friends, let us analyze whether the service provider is outside India. We are talking about a scenario where this Indian aircraft is taking MRO services from an Australian company. Whether the service provider is there outside India, the answer is yes. Service recipient from India, the answer is yes. Place of supply. If the place of supply happens to be in India, it is an import of service. Otherwise, it is not an import of service. Let us discuss whether the place of supply happens to be in India. Which section would give you the place of supply? Friends, is it goods or services? It is services. Section 12 or section 13? It is going to be section 13 because the service provider is from outside India. In section 13, is it getting covered under section 13 subsection 3 clause A, where the recipient of service should make the goods available to the provider of the service so that the provider of service can perform the services? The answer is yes. The Indian aircraft or the Indian airline company has to make the aircraft available to the foreign supplier so that the foreign supplier can perform his services on these goods. It is squarely getting covered under 13 subsection 3 clause A. And there is no proviso for this. There is no proviso for this because proviso is there only when goods are temporarily imported into India. There is no proviso for goods temporarily exported outside India. So therefore, squarely getting covered under 13 subsection 3 clause A, which tells you the place of supply shall be the place where the services are actually performed. Now friends, where are the services actually performed? The services are actually performed in Australia in our example. So friends, location of supplier outside India, location of recipient inside India, place of supply outside India. Place of supply is outside India. So now friends, since place of supply is outside India, it doesn't happen to be an import of service. Since it is not an import of service, this airline company cannot be asked to pay GST under reverse charge mechanism. Friends, please remember the thumb rule. Just because you have foreign currency outflow, it doesn't mean there is an import of service which is related to it. And just because you have foreign currency inflow, it doesn't mean that there is an export of service which is related to it. You have to satisfy the conditions, 3 conditions of import of service and 5 conditions of export of service. Only then this transaction would fit to be called either as an export or an import. Now friends, analyzing this example further, as regards this case is concerned, the place of supply happens to be the place of performance, which happens to be in Australia. So therefore, according to the Indian GST law, it is not an import of service. There is no levy at all. GST need not be paid at all. So therefore, there is no question of reverse charge or forward charge. Now friends, the issue is all these Indian aircraft companies would get the MRO services done from outside India only. Internationally, that country is zero rating it, not charging any tax. Back home, your country is not treating this as an import of service. There's no GST which is being charged. All these Indian service providers would lose the market. These Indian aircraft, anyways on their foreign travel, they would get their MRO services done from outside itself. So therefore, this was the issue which the service provider was facing. So now friends, the government asked him, what are we supposed to do? The service provider takes him to section 13, subsection 13 and tells, in order to prevent non-taxation. Now friends, the earlier example which we had seen, it was double taxation. Now this example what we are seeing, it is non-taxation. Now this Indian service provider tells, treat that service as an import of service. Let the airline company pay GST under reverse charge mechanism, then let there be a level playing field. Whether this airline company is getting serviced within India, the Indian supplier would charge him forward charge mechanism. If this airline company is getting serviced from outside India, back in India, ask him to pay GST under reverse charge mechanism. Let there be a level playing field. In this current scenario, prior to this notification, what was happening was when the Indian airline company got it serviced from India, GST was being charged under forward charge mechanism by the service provider. But if it is getting the services from outside India, back in that country it was regarded as an export of service. Here it was not regarded as an import of service. So there was non-taxation at both the countries. Neither Australian country was charging any tax, nor the Indian government is charging any taxes because this was not an import of service. So friends, in order to prevent non-taxation of a supply of service or for the uniform application of rules, the government shall have the power to notify any description of service or circumstances in which the place of supply shall be the place of effective use and enjoyment of a service. So under 13 subsection 13, there is no requirement for separate notification. The same wordings would solve both the issues. These wordings we've already seen. supply of maintenance, repair or overall services in respect of aircraft, aircraft engines and other aircraft components or parts supplied to a person for use in the course of furtherance of business. The place of supply shall be the location of recipient of service. So now friends, let us visualize this example again. This Indian aircraft goes abroad from Australia, gets the MRO services done. Now friends, here by this notification, the place of supply happens to be the location of recipient. The location of recipient is Delhi. The place of supply is Delhi. The location of recipient is the place of supply. So now friends, in our example, this airline, whether it is getting serviced within Delhi itself, the Delhi supplier would charge in GST under forward charge mechanism. Whether it is going to Australia and getting the MRO services done, now the place of supply happens to be back in Delhi. The location of supplier outside India, location of recipient inside India, place of supply inside India, qualifies to be an import of service, GST payable under reverse charge mechanism, level playing field is being established. So now friends, level playing field, prior to amendment, no, there was non-taxation neither there in Australia nor in India. Post amendment, yes, there is a level playing field which is being established. So now friends, this is the summary. MRO services for business purposes. If location of supplier is in India, location of supplier is in India, location of recipient is outside India, place of supply is also outside India by means of notification which we had just seen. What is the result? It happens to be an interstate supply. Location of supplier in India, place of supply outside India, it is an interstate supply. And if foreign currency is being received and the supplier and recipient are not distinct persons, it qualifies to be an export of service. The benefit of zero rating is going to be available. The next one, in the next example, what we had seen, location of supplier outside India, location of recipient inside India, place of supply also inside India. The result is it is an interstate supply. It happens to be an import of service, and import of service according to section 7 is an interstate supply. It happens to be an import of service and GST is payable under reverse charge mechanism. So friends, two issues are being solved. First one, a service which was not a zero rated supply is being made a zero rated supply. The second one, a service which did not qualify to be an import of service is now qualified to be an import of service and GST would be paid under reverse charge mechanism. The next amendment in the area of refund. Friends, there's a circular which has clarified a scenario. Now friends, this circular is with regard to inverted duty structure. Now what do you mean by inverted duty structure? Where the rate of tax on inputs is greater than the rate of tax on outward supplies. If you are satisfying this equation, then your tax structure is inverted duty structure. You are eligible to claim a refund of accumulated input tax credit. Friends, as regards as claiming a refund of accumulated input tax credit is concerned, it can happen only in two scenarios. One, if you are engaged in making zero rated supplies. Two, if your structure happens to be inverted duty structure. Only in these two cases, you can take a refund of input tax credit which is being accumulated. Other than these cases, you will never be allowed a refund of input tax credit from the government's side. Now friends, the question before us is, let's say there's one product called as product X. There's one product called as product X. Now, let's say a date from 1st of August 2020. Prior to 1st of August 2020, this product X attracted a rate of tax at 18%. Prior to 1st of August 2020, this product X attracted a rate of tax at 18%. With effect from 1st of August 2020, the rate was reduced and the new rate happens to be 12%. Now friends, there is a trader. There is a trader who has got some accumulated stock, who has got stock in hand on 1st of August 2020, the day on which the rate has changed to 12%. Now the product is the same. Please understand friends, the product is not different. The product is the same. The rate has changed. Earlier it was 18. Now it became 12. Now this person, this trader has got stock in his hand where these goods which were being purchased, he had purchased it at 18%. Now these goods, when he is going to sell them, he is going to supply them at charging GST at the rate of 12%. The question is, can he encash it? Can the credit which is being accumulated, can he ask for a refund? Treating this structure to be an inverted duty structure. Treating this structure to be an inverted duty structure, because when he purchased these goods, the rate of tax was 18. When he is going to supply these goods, the rate of tax is going to be 12. Can you call this structure as an inverted duty structure and allow the trader to apply for a refund? Now friends, to which the government's reply is, this particular product X never carried two different rates of taxes on one given day. On any one single day, it did not carry two different rates of taxes. So therefore, this cannot be called as an inverted duty structure. Meaning thereby, let's say you take the case of 31st of July 2020. On 31st of July 2020, whether you purchase it, it was 18. Whether you supply it, it is going to be 18. Let's say on and from 1st of August 2020, whether you purchase it, it is going to be 12. Whether you supply it, it is going to be 12. So friends, at any one single given point of time, your inward and outward was always same. You're having different inwards and outwards at two different given point of times. You purchased it, you're taking the purchase date, the rate of tax was 18. When you're going to supply it, it is on a different day. So therefore, the rate of tax is going to be at 12%. But the government says on any one single given point of time, the rate of tax of inward and the rate of tax of outward was same. So therefore, we will not treat this as an inverted duty structure and refund is not going to be eligible to this person. So this is as regards as a clarification in inverted duty structure. Now friends, the next change which has come, it is a very, very important change. The change which has come is in Rule 89 Sub Rule 4, there is a formula. Now friends, as we all know, as regards as zero rating is concerned, there are two options which are given. 16(3)(a) tells you give a bond or give a LUT, do not pay any output tax. You would have input tax credit which is getting accumulated. Go and apply for a refund of that accumulated input tax credit. 16(3)(b) tells you you pay your outward supply tax, whatever credits you are having, use it against this output tax what you are paying, go and apply for a refund of output tax. So 16(3)(a) enables a refund of accumulated credit, that is, it is a refund of input tax. 16(3)(b) is a refund of output tax. Now as regards as 16(3)(a) is concerned, a person was given a bond, LUT, did not pay any output tax. On his inward supplies, he would have made certain purchases, he would have paid input taxes, he would have taken those credits, he wants to apply for a refund. The refund formula is there under 89 Sub Rule 4. The general refund formula is there under 89 Sub Rule 4. Of course, you have 4A and 4B. The general formula which is there, it is there under 89 Sub Rule 4. Now friends, what is the formula in 89 Sub Rule 4? The formula tells you refund amount, that is the maximum amount of refund which you are eligible for. Refund amount would be net input tax credit multiplied by turnover of zero rated supply of goods plus turnover of zero rated supply of services divided by adjusted total turnover. Whatever answer you are going to get is going to be the maximum amount of refund which you are eligible for. Now friends, in this formula, there is a change which has happened. They have amended the definition of turnover of zero rated supply of goods. Friends, the government has observed that many exporters are overvaluing their exports. Now what is the advantage they get by overvaluing their exports? By overvaluing their exports, as regards as refund under GST is concerned, we will restrict our discussion to the advantage under refunds under GST. Once an export of goods is being overvalued, what would happen is your numerator would obviously increase. So turnover of zero rated supply of goods, if you are overvaluing it, your numerator would increase and resultantly the refund amount which you are going to be eligible for also is going to increase. The refund amount which you are going to be eligible for is also going to be increased. So therefore, just to encash more refund, the government has observed that certain exporters are overvaluing their turnover of zero rated supply of goods. So friends, the government has amended the definition or the description which is giving to this terminology, turnover of zero rated supply of goods. Let's have a look. So turnover of zero rated supply of goods, the value of zero rated supply of goods made during a relevant period under bond or LUT. Please understand, we are only discussing about bond LUT exports because 89 Sub Rule 4 is only for export of goods or export of services which are made under bond or LUT. So the value of zero rated supply of goods made during a relevant period under bond or LUT or other than the turnover in respect of which refund is claimed under 4A or 4B or both, or the value which is 1.5 times the value of like goods domestically supplied by the same or similar place supplier as declared by the supplier, whichever is less. Whichever is less other than the turnover of supplies in respect of which refund is claimed under 4A or 4B or both. So now friends, here this element which is there in the formula, turnover of zero rated supply of goods. Now this is restricted to 1.5 times. This is restricted to 1.5 times the value of the domestic supplies which is made by the same or similarly placed suppliers. So now say for example friends, domestically if you are supplying your goods, let's say at 1 lakh rupees. Domestically you are supplying your goods at 1 lakh rupees, and let's say export consignment what you have made. Export consignment what you made of the same goods by the same supplier. We are taking the example of same goods, same supplier. Domestically he supplies it at 1 lakh. Export what he is making. Export what he is making. If he is making at 1,20,000 rupees. If he is making it at 1,20,000 rupees. Now friends, what is going to be the turnover of zero rated supply of goods? It tells you either the actual export value what you have taken or 1.5 times the value of domestic supplies, whichever is lower. So now friends, what is 1.5 times? This is export. Now this is 1.5 times of domestic. So what is the 1.5 times of domestic what you are making? It is going to be 1,50,000 rupees. So friends, here the answer is going to be 1,20,000 rupees, which is the actual value, actual exports what you have made. Let's say scenario number 2. Domestically you are supplying it at 1 lakh rupees. Domestically you supply these goods at 1 lakh rupees. The same goods in the same quantity, exports you are making it at 2 lakh rupees. Exports you are making it at 2 lakh rupees. Now friends, what is 1.5 times the domestic value? 1.5 times the domestic value happens to be 1,50,000 rupees. Now friends, what is going to be the turnover of zero rated supply of goods for the limited purpose of 89 sub rule 4 formula? It tells you it is going to be either the actual export value what you have made, or it is going to be 1.5 times the domestic value. So now friends, whichever is lower. So the 1.5 times the domestic value happens to be 1,50,000 rupees, even though you might have raised an export invoice for 2 lakhs, but still for the purpose of refund, for the specific purpose of the formula under 89 sub rule 4, this turnover of zero rated supply of goods would be regarded as only 1,50,000 rupees. So what would happen friends? What would happen is, by this mechanism, the refund of this particular exporter would get reduced by reducing the numerator from 2 lakh rupees to 1,50,000 rupees. 2 lakh was his actual exports. Now it is being reduced to 1,50,000 only and only for the limited purpose of formula under 89 sub rule 4. This is not going to impact any other place. This is not going to impact any other place. When I am saying this is not going to impact any other place, the question would come, let's suppose for example, would his aggregate turnover also get impacted? The answer is no. His aggregate turnover is not going to be impacted. As regards as his aggregate turnover is concerned, it would be taken, 2 lakh rupees would be considered to be a part of his aggregate turnover and not 1,50,000 rupees in the second example. In the first example, his actual exports and the formula which was taking the valuation was the same. In the second example, his actual export valuation was 2 lakh. However, the formula considered it to be 1,50,000 rupees, and this is only and only for the limited purpose of this formula. This is not going to impact anywhere else. Your aggregate turnover will consider 2 lakhs and it will not consider 1,50,000 rupees. So this is not going to impact in any other places. Now friends, what are the issues which are there? Let us discuss few issues which are there in this. Question number 1 is, there is no such restriction. There is no such restriction that your value would be restricted to 1.5 times of your domestic supplies. There is no such restriction as regards as turnover of zero rated supply of services is concerned. For turnover of zero rated supply of services, there is no such restriction. So friends, this applies only for turnover on zero rated supply of goods. The second issue is, this applies only when you are exporting under bond or LUT. If you are exporting goods, please understand, if you are exporting goods on payment of IGST, if you are exporting goods on payment of IGST, there is no such restriction that your turnover is going to be restricted. For the purpose of obtaining refund, it is going to be restricted to 1.5 times of your domestic supplies. This provision is not there when you are going under section 16(3)(b) on payment of IGST. So two things: one, it is not applicable for services; two, it is not applicable for on payment of IGST. I'm sure you're able to follow this. Now friends, the next question which arises is, let's say now I say the formula: refund amount is net ITC multiplied by turnover of zero rated supply of goods plus turnover of zero rated supply of services divided by adjusted total turnover. Divided by adjusted total turnover. Now friends, the question is whether my adjusted total turnover, please follow the question very carefully, whether my adjusted total turnover, this adjusted total turnover will also include my turnover of zero rated supply of goods. Now inside this adjusted total turnover, when I am going to take the turnover of zero rated supply of goods, should I take the actual value or should I take the value which I found out according to this C portion? This element is called as C portion. It is defined as C. Now whether it is going to be according to 89 sub rule 4 clause C or whether it is going to be actual. Now friends, I am not discussing about the numerator. Please understand, I am not discussing about the numerator. I am discussing about the denominator. My adjusted total turnover will also include turnover of zero rated supply of goods. Now whether when I am calculating my adjusted total turnover, should I take my actual export value, that means in our example, should I take 2 lakh rupees, or when I calculate my adjusted total turnover, should I take 1,50,000 rupees, which is the element which I have taken for numerator. Now friends, please understand. Please understand, as regards as this change which has come, this has come to restrict the refund to the exporter. Now friends, let's take an example. Say even in adjusted total turnover, if you are considering the same restricted value, refund is never restricted. Say for example, in a particular month, this exporter has got only one export of goods consignment. Domestically supplies it at 1 lakh, exports he is making at 2 lakhs. Now friends, according to this amendment, turnover of zero rated supply of goods happens to be 1,50,000 rupees. And in the denominator, as regards as adjusted total turnover is concerned, if you are taking the same 1,50,000 rupees, your refund is not restricted at all. It is going to be 1,50,000 divided by 1,50,000 rupees. So friends, as regards as adjusted total turnover is concerned, this will also include a component of turnover of zero rated supply of goods. There you have to take it at actuals. So here, when you are in adjusted total turnover, when you are going to calculate this, when you are going to take the element of export of goods, you would have to take 2 lakh rupees. So now his refund would get restricted. In turnover of zero rated supply of goods, it would be 1,50,000 rupees divided by adjusted total turnover. It is going to be 2 lakh rupees. So earlier you would have received the refund of, in the ratio terms, you would have received 100%. Now you are going to receive only 75%. So by this way, the refund would be restricted. In adjusted total turnover, you should take the actual figures of exports and not the restricted figures of exports, because the intention of the government itself is to restrict the refund to the extent of 1.5 times of the domestic supplies. Leave the intention, even the legal wordings tell you the same way. How do we say that the legal wordings tell us the same way? That as regards as adjusted total turnover is concerned, we should not take the restricted value, we have to take the actual value. Please let us have a look at the definition of adjusted total turnover. Now friends, if you look into the definition of adjusted total turnover, it tells you, I'll show you a proof as to why we should take the real figures and not the restricted figures. Adjusted total turnover defined in clause E. It tells you, take the turnover in a state or union territory as defined under section 2112 excluding the turnover of services. So remove the turnover of services. After you remove the turnover of services, that means what remains? The turnover in a state or union territory as defined in section 2112, you exclude the turnover of services. So you are taking turnover of zero rated supply of goods and turnover of non-zero rated supply of goods. You removed the turnover of services. So after you remove the turnover of services, you have to add back the turnover of services. Friends, now when you add back the turnover of services could be zero rated supply of services and non-zero rated supply of services. Now friends, please have a careful watch. They tell you add back turnover of zero rated supply of services determined in terms of clause D above. Turnover of zero rated supply of services determined in terms of clause D above. Now friends, if you could recollect, turnover of zero rated supply of services, it means which turnover? That turnover for which invoice is raised, payment also is received. Only that will be regarded as turnover of zero rated supply of services. Now friends, please have a very close watch here. As regards as turnover of zero rated supply of services is concerned, when are you going to consider it into this numerator? Only when invoice is raised. Only when invoice is raised and also payment is received. But friends, according to your books of accounts, even though invoice is raised, even though when an invoice is raised, it becomes your turnover. Even though when an invoice is raised, it is going to become your turnover. Fine. Now friends, when you're going to compute the adjusted total turnover, please understand, when you're going to compute the adjusted total turnover, which element should you take? When inside this adjusted total turnover, you have a component of zero rated supply of services. Now, this zero rated supply of services when you are going to take, should you take it according to the books which is actual, that means invoice raised, payment not received, or should you take it according to this numerator element, invoice raised and payment received? I repeat the question friends, as regards as adjusted total turnover is concerned, it contains a component of turnover of zero rated supply of services. Now, what is the value of this turnover of zero rated supply of services? Is this going to be actuals according to the books? In your books, even though invoice is raised, payment even though it is not received, it is still there in your turnover. Would you take that one, or are you going to take the zero rated supply of services as what you have taken in numerator? Now friends, here the definition of adjusted total turnover clearly tells you that you have to take the numerator component and not according to the books of accounts. That is the reason that from turnover inside the state, you're removing the turnover of services. You're removing the turnover of services so that your denominator is aligned according to the numerator. Had you not removed the turnover of services, whatever was there in your books of accounts, that adjusted total turnover you would have taken. But no, the lawmakers are asking you, remove the turnover of services. Now, after having removed the turnover of services, what is there? When you are saying you remove the turnover of services, you removed zero rated supply of services, you also removed non-zero rated supply of services. Add them back both. But while adding turnover of zero rated supply of services, take it according to the numerator. That is, these are the adjusted figures, invoice raised, payment also received. So friends, the point which we are trying to compare and analyze is, as regards as adjusted total turnover is concerned, this adjusted total turnover in clause E, it is clearly telling you that for the purpose of turnover of zero rated supply of services, take it according to the numerator. That means invoice raised and payment received do not go according to the books of accounts. But friends, as regards as turnover of zero rated supply of goods is concerned, there is no specific mention in this clause E. This doesn't tell you that while computing adjusted total turnover, take this according to C. That is a restricted value. You have to go as per the actual values. There is no specific mention in adjusted total turnover as well. The lawmakers have been cautious in specifically mentioning turnover of zero rated supply of services according to the numerator, but the lawmakers have deliberately not mentioned turnover of zero rated supply of goods also according to the numerator. I repeat, the lawmakers have been cautious that while you take the adjusted total turnover, when you include the turnover of zero rated supply of services, take it according to the numerator. But in defining adjusted total turnover, the lawmakers have deliberately not told you that you take it according to the numerator. The lawmakers tell you, take it according to actuals. Our intention is to restrict the refund. So friends, we could close this session, this particular aspect, by simple conclusion that as regards as the numerator is concerned, turnover of zero rated supply of goods, it is going to be according to the restricted value, according to the specific definition which is given, it would be restricted to 1.5 times of the domestic supplies which are being made. But as regards as the denominator is concerned, this adjusted total turnover will include your actual value of exports. It would not include your restricted value of exports which you have computed according to this clause C. Friends, our next discussion is with regard to realization of sale proceeds. Now friends, whether realization of sale proceeds is a criteria under GST for GST to get attracted or for a transaction to be called as a supply. Now friends, let us bifurcate this into two. Realization of sale proceeds, let us discuss with the aspect of domestic transactions and international transactions, which is exports. Now friends, as regards as domestic transactions is concerned, let's suppose I supply these goods or services to you. Now, irrespective of fact whether I receive or I realize the sale proceeds or not, still it qualifies to be a supply. Please understand, GST is a tax on supply and it is not a tax on receipt of consideration of supply. It is a tax on supply, whether consideration is received or it is not received. The moment supply has happened, the taxable event has occurred and the levy gets crystallized. So as regards as domestic transaction is concerned, here realization is not relevant. Realization of sale proceeds is not relevant. Whether it is realized or it is not realized, the government has got nothing to do with it. Supply has happened, the taxable event has occurred, the levy has got crystallized, GST needs to be paid. Now friends, as regards as international transactions is concerned, in case of exports, exports could be of goods or it could be of services. Export, it could be of goods or it could be of services. Now friends, as regards as export of goods is concerned, whether realization of sale proceeds is a criteria for a transaction to qualify as an export of goods, please recollect the definition of export of goods. Export of goods means that taking goods from India to a place outside India, that is export of goods. Whether realization of sale proceeds, is it a criteria to qualify a transaction as an export of goods? The answer is no. So here friends, as regards as export of goods is concerned, even if you do not realize the sale proceeds, still it would be regarded as an export of goods, and once it is an export of goods, it would be called as a zero rated supply. And accordingly, whatever the benefits are there of the zero rated supply, that would be made available. As regards as export of services is concerned, what do you mean by export of service? Recollect the definition of export of service. Supplier to be in India, recipient to be outside India, place of supply to be outside India, amount, consideration should be received in convertible foreign currency or in INR. And of course, supplier and recipient not to be merely establishment of distinct persons. Now friends, here the definition of export of service itself has a criteria, itself has a condition that only when the consideration is realized in convertible forex or where permitted in INR. So therefore, in essence, only when the sale proceeds are realized, a transaction qualifies to be an export of service, and only when a transaction qualifies to be an export of service, it could be called as zero rated supply, and only then the benefit of zero rating would be made available. So friends, as regards as export of service is concerned, yes, realization of sale proceeds is a criteria. Only then it qualifies to be an export of service. Only then it is called as a zero rated supply. Only then the related benefits are available. The benefits of refund is available. Now friends, our focus is over here. As regards as export of goods is concerned, even if you do not realize the sale proceeds, is it supply? Yes. Even though you do not realize the sale proceeds, is it export of goods? Let's say I have sent the goods to Australia. Is it supply? Yes. Is it export of goods? Yes. Even though if I have not received my consideration, even though if I have not realized the sale proceeds, still it is an export of goods, because the definition of export of goods, neither the definition of supply has any criteria that consideration of the sale proceeds should be realized. So therefore, it fits into the export of goods. It is a zero rated supply. The refund benefits would be made available to me. So now friends, many of the exporters started misutilizing this provision. Many of the exporters of goods started misutilizing this provision wherein fictitious exports were made even without realizing the sale proceeds, refund benefits were encashed. And technically, department could not touch them because even if they are not realizing the sale proceeds, still it is an export of goods, still it is a zero rated supply, still they are entitled for refund. So friends, now in order to arrest this, the government has got a provision, rule number 96B. The government has a provision, rule number 96B, wherein the government states that, please carefully follow the structure of 96B. In 96B, the government states that if you do not, please understand and please follow very, very carefully, the structure is very important. If the sale proceeds are not realized, whatever refund which is given to you will be recovered. In simple, this is the essence of 96B. 96B tells you in case of export of goods. Why do not they talk about export of services? Because in case of export of services, only when forex is received or the sale proceeds is realized in convertible forex or in INR wherever permitted, only then it is an export of service. And only when it is an export of service, a person can apply for refund. Without receiving foreign currency, it is never qualified to be a transaction of export of service and refund can never be applied at all. Application for refund in case of export of service can be made only when sale proceeds are realized in convertible forex or in INR wherever permitted. So there, in case of export of service, without the supplier having realized the forex or realized in INR wherever permissible, refund the department would never have given itself. So therefore, there is no question of misutilization in case of export of services. However, friends, in case of export of goods, even though the sale proceeds are not realized, it is an export of goods, it is a zero rated supply. The supplier or the exporter is very well within his right to make an application for refund and the department cannot deny that technically. Also, because it is an export of goods, it is a zero rated supply. However, the department wants to have a check over misutilization or those people who are misusing the provision. So therefore, 96B tells you that in case of export of goods, if the sale proceeds are not realized, which prima facie tells you that it should be a dummy transaction. If the sale proceeds are not realized, whatever refund is given to you, we will recover it back. Now friends, let me pose few questions. The 96B is only so much. We will discuss this at length little later on. Before we go into this, let me just understand, have you understood 96B in a broader sense? Friends, does 96B tell you that if sale proceeds are not realized, please follow carefully. Does 96B tell you if the sale proceeds are not realized, the transaction would not be regarded as an export of goods? Does 96B tell you so? The answer is no. 96B simply tells you if the sale proceeds are not realized, whatever refund you have already applied and received from us, we would recover it back. 96B does not tell you if the sale proceeds are not realized, this transaction would not be an export of goods. 96B doesn't tell you that. Question number 2. Does 96B tell you that I would give you refund only when you realize the sale proceeds in case of export of goods? Does 96B tell you that? In case of export of service, the provisions is that in case of export of service, only when you realize the forex, convertible forex or INR wherever permitted, only then it is export of service. And only when it is an export of service, it is a zero rated supply. And only when it is a zero rated supply, you can apply for a refund. Does 96B tell you in case of export of goods, you can apply for a refund or you are entitled to make an application for refund, or I would be granting you refund only after you realize the forex, only after you realize the sale proceeds? The answer is no. 96B doesn't tell you that. 96B simply tells you, you made an export of goods. Agreed. Is it zero rated supply? Yes. Can you apply for refund? Yes. Will department be giving refund? Yes. Then what should you do? You have to realize your sale proceeds. If you realize, fair enough. If you do not realize whatever refund which was granted to you, that refund we would recover it back. So much is the scope of 96B. One last question, friends. Does 96B tell you? Please, if you had followed the wordings carefully, did 96B tell you that you have to realize the sale proceeds in Forex? The answer is no. Friends, 96B simply tells you that you have to realize the sale proceeds. You have to realize the sale proceeds. There's no mandate that it should come only in convertible Forex. Unlike services where there is a mandate that consideration should be realized only in convertible Forex, and as an exception where special permission is given in INR, 96B doesn't tell you anything. 96B simply tells you realize the sale proceeds. Doesn't tell you realize the sale proceeds in Forex also. It tells you realize the sale proceeds. Otherwise, whatever refund is given to you will be recovered back. So friends, the scope of 96B is only so much. Realize sale proceeds. Otherwise, whatever refund was given to you would be recovered back. If you do not realize sale proceeds, will the transaction be disqualified from being called as a zero rated supply in case of goods? The answer is no. It would still be a zero rated supply only. But whatever refund which was given to you, that the department would recover it back along with interest. So friends, now here we go, 96B. Where any refund of unutilized input tax credit on account of export of goods or of integrated tax paid on export of goods. Why are they talking only about export of goods? Because in case of export of services, friends, the realization of sale proceeds is already inbuilt in the definition itself, which is not in the case of export of goods. So now friends, it tells you where any refund of unutilized ITC on account of export of goods or integrated tax paid on export of goods has been paid to an applicant. So now friends, which scenario does it cover? Does it cover only 16(3)(a) of the IGST Act, or it also covers 16(3)(b) of the IGST Act? Friends, it covers both the scenarios. I might be an exporter of goods under bond LUT. Then I might have taken refund of unutilized ITC, because on output I wouldn't have paid anything. I would have taken a refund of unutilized ITC. I might have not gone under bond or LUT. I might have paid IGST on export of goods. In that case, I would have applied for a refund of IGST paid on export of goods. So whatever refund it is, whether it is refund of accumulated ITC or it is a refund of output tax, whatever refund it is, will 96B apply on both the mechanisms? The answer is yes. So where any refund of unutilized ITC 16(3)(a) of export of goods or of IGST paid on export of goods has been paid to an applicant. So IGST paid on export of goods 16(3)(b) has been paid to an applicant, but the sale proceeds, friends, please understand, here it uses the wordings sale proceeds. It doesn't say Forex. Sale proceeds in respect of such export goods have not been realized either in full or in part in India within the period allowed under FEMA, including any extension of such period. So friends, it tells you we have already paid you the refund, and only after the refund is paid to the applicant, 96B's role comes. 96B tells you we have already paid you the refund. Have you realized your sale proceeds? If yes, no issues. If no, what is the time limit within which you have to realize? The time limit is the time limit which is given under FEMA, including extensions if any. Then the person to whom the refund has been made, he shall first voluntarily deposit the amount so refunded to the extent of non-realization of sale proceeds. So now friends, this is proportionate mechanism. Let's say you raised an invoice of $10,000 and let's say you got a refund of $1,000. Now friends, on the invoice of $10,000 which you have raised, let's say you realized $4,000. What is unrealized? $6,000. So to the extent of, assuming if it is not getting realized within the time limit allowed under FEMA, to the extent of non-realization, so here it is 60%. So whatever refund you have received, 60% of that you are supposed to pay back to the government. So friends, the person to whom the refund has been made shall deposit the amount so refunded to the extent of non-realization of sale proceeds along with applicable interest. So friends, the day on which you received the refund, from that day till the date when you are going to repay that back refund to the government, for that period you are supposed to pay interest also. along with applicable interest. And when are you supposed to pay this? Within 30 days of the expiry of the said period. So the moment the period allowed under FEMA is over, from that date, within a period of 30 days, whatever refund which you have received to the extent of non-realization of sale proceeds, you are supposed to repay that back within a period of 30 days along with interest. Within 30 days of the expiry of the said period, or as the case may be, the extended period, failing which. So friends, first the option is given to the assessee. He voluntarily has to repay that back to the government, and if he doesn't do so, when is he supposed to do so? The period allowed under FEMA gets expired. Within next 30 days, he has to repay back the refund back to the government to the extent of non-realization of sale proceeds along with interest if he doesn't do so. Failing which, the amount refunded shall be recovered in accordance with the provisions of 73 or 74 of the Act, as the case may be, as applicable for recovery of erroneous refund along with interest under section 50. So friends, first you voluntarily pay it. If you do not voluntarily pay it, then the department would give you a show cause notice under 73 or 74, and accordingly there would be representations, order would be passed, and then the department would recover it along with tax, interest and applicable penalty as applicable under section 73 or under section 74. So friends, I am sure you are clear with the scope of 96B. The scope of 96B tells you, it doesn't tell you if you do not realize sale proceeds, it is not zero rated supply. It doesn't tell you if you do not realize sale proceeds, don't apply for refund. It simply tells you, you have applied for refund, we have given it to you. If you do not realize the sale proceeds to the extent of non-realization, pay back the refund along with interest. Failing which, we will recover it from you according to section 73 or according to section 74. Now friends, why is this provision there? This provision is there to arrest fictitious exporters having or knowing that realization is not a criteria in case of export of goods if they are unjustly getting enriched, if they are defrauding the government by applying refund. If it is a fictitious transaction, the government, to arrest that, they have got 96B. However friends, there could be a genuine case as well. Genuinely, I might have been an exporter. I might have made an export of goods, zero rated supply, applied for refund, but I am not getting the money from my customer. Genuinely, it is a bad debt. Now, already it is a bad debt. The principal amount itself is a bad debt. And beyond that, whatever refund I have received, if the government is asking me to return that, would it not be too much of hardship on me? The answer is yes. So friends, in case of genuine bad debts, the government has got a proviso. They say that provided that where the sale proceeds or any part thereof in respect of such export of goods are not realized by the applicant within the period allowed under FEMA, but the Reserve Bank of India writes off the requirement of realization of sale proceeds on merits, the refund paid to the applicant shall not be recovered. So friends, here they say that if the Reserve Bank of India has permitted you to write it off as a bad debt, the Reserve Bank of India writes off the requirement of you realizing the sale proceeds. In that case, whatever refund which is being paid, that will not be recovered. So friends, in case of genuine bad debts, they have taken care of. Otherwise, in case of fictitious cases, whatever is the refund amount which is given, that needs to be repaid back to the government along with interest. 96B2. Please follow the transaction carefully. I make an export of goods. It is a zero rated supply. I apply for refund. I receive the refund. Whether sale proceeds are realized? No. It is not realized within the time period which is allowed under FEMA plus extension. Should I pay back the refund which I have received from the government to the extent of non-realization? Yes. Along with interest? Yes. I pay that back. Subsequently, I realize the sale proceeds. Now friends, when subsequently I am realizing the sale proceeds, whatever refund which I have given back to the government along with interest, should I get that back amount again? The answer is yes. Please read 96B sub rule 2. Where the sale proceeds are realized by the applicant in full or in part after the amount of refund has been recovered from him under sub rule 1, and the applicant produces the evidence about such realization within a period of 3 months from the date of realization of sale proceeds. So subsequently, when I am realizing it within 3 months period, I have to go and produce the evidence to the government that I have realized the sale proceeds. Then the amount so recovered, so whatever was recovered, the taxes along with interest whatever I have paid, the refund along with interest whatever I have paid, The amount so recovered shall be refunded by the proper officer to the applicant to the extent of realization of sale proceeds, provided the sale proceeds have been realized within such extended period as permitted by Reserve Bank of India. So friends, the provision is very simple. As regards as 96B sub-rule 2 is concerned, I made an export. It was a zero rated supply of goods. I made an application for refund. I received the refund amount. Now, subsequently, within the time period allowed under FEMA plus extension, I did not realize the sale proceeds. Now, should I pay back? And assuming a case that RBI had not written off this case, should I pay back? Should I pay back the refund to the government along with interest? The answer is yes. I paid it back. Now friends, after I paid this back amount, after I pay back this amount, I realize the sale proceeds. Now friends, when I realize this sale proceeds, whatever refund which I have paid back along with interest, that amount the proper officer is supposed to refund this back again to me. Now friends, let's assume a case. Subsequently, I am realizing the amount, but I am realizing it only proportionately. I am realizing it only partly. Then to that extent to what I have realized, so much of amount, the proper officer will repay that back to me. I am sure you are able to follow this. Now friends, let us discuss about the coverage of 96B. Does it cover all zero rated supplies? Friends, does 96B cover all zero rated supplies? Question number 1. Does it cover zero rated supply of services? Friends, zero rated supplies could either be of goods or it could be of services. Does it cover zero rated supply of services? The answer is no. Not required also, because realization of sale proceeds is already built into the definition of export of service itself. Zero rated supply of goods. Does it cover zero rated supply of goods? Now friends, even in zero rated supply of goods, it could be a supply which is made to SEZ. Goods might have been supplied to SEZ, or it could be an export. Both are zero rated supply of goods. Yes. Does 96B cover supply of goods to an SEZ? The answer is no. 96B only covers export of goods which is being made. So does it cover all zero rated supply? The answer is no. It covers only and only export of goods. Next one. Does it cover both 16.3A and 16.3B? In case of export of goods, I might have gone under bond LUT, taken a refund of accumulated ITC, or I might have gone on payment of IGST in 16.3B. I might have taken a refund of output tax what I have paid. Does it cover both these scenarios? The answer is yes. It covers both these scenarios. Is it a direct recovery or adjudication process? Now friends, this question is very important. Friends, if you carefully analyze Rule 96A, I hope you remember 96A. As regards as 96A was concerned, what was 96A about? 96A simply told you that what is the procedure of bond or LUT. That means you give a bond or LUT. Let's suppose I am making an export of goods or export of services today. Is it a taxable supply? The answer is yes. There is a levy of tax. On export of goods, also on export of services, there is a levy of tax. It is a taxable supply. The government has chosen not to effectively collect taxes from you. As per legislature, it is a taxable supply. The government has got all rights to collect taxes from you. The government has chosen not to collect taxes from you. So therefore, now friends, please concentrate. Today you are sending the goods to Australia, or you are supplying services to Australia. You are claiming this to be an export of goods or export of services, and under bond LUT you are not paying any taxes. Please concentrate. Today you are making an export of goods or an export of service, or to be more precise, today you are claiming this transaction to be an export of goods or export of services, and you are not paying any output tax which otherwise should have been paid because it is a taxable supply. Now friends, why is the government choosing not to collect taxes on this? Because it should be an export of goods or export of services. Now friends, please understand, today when you are raising an invoice, you are claiming this transaction to be an export of goods or export of services. It is not yet proven that this is an export of goods or export of services. How would it be proven that it is an export of goods? Only when the goods are sent outside India. The document is only when you have a shipping bill in hand, and only when there is an export general manifest which is being generated. Only then it would be proven that it is an export of goods. Today, is it an export of goods? The answer is no. You are claiming it to be an export of goods. When it would be concluded that it is an export of goods? Only when export general manifest is being generated. As regards its services is concerned, today you're claiming this transaction to be an export of service and not paying output tax. When will this be concluded to be an export of service? Only when you realize convertible forex or INR wherever permitted. So friends, export of goods or export of services which are claiming to be as export of goods and export of services today, the proof of which is going to come in future. So today you are not paying any output tax depending on the proof which is going to come in future. So friends, now the government is giving you time. Today the transaction which you are claiming it to be an export of goods on which you are not paying any output tax, within a period of 3 months, furnish the proof that the goods have been exported. Furnish the proof that the goods have been exported. Then whatever taxes which you have not paid, you are not entitled to pay also, or you are not liable to pay also. Similarly, the transaction which you are claiming to be an export of service today, and based on that claim you have not paid any output tax. Based on that claim you have not paid any output tax. Prove that this transaction is an export of service within a period of 1 year plus extension. Prove that it is a export of service. How do you prove that? Bring forex or INR where permitted within a period of 1 year plus extension. Then whatever you claimed it to be an export of service gets concluded as an export of service. Whatever output tax what you have not paid, you are not liable to pay also. Otherwise, in case of goods, if you are not proving it is an export of goods within a period of 3 months, in case of services, you are not proving it to be an export of services within a period of 1 year plus extension, then 15 days from the expiry of the time period. In case of goods, 15 days from the expiry of 3 months from the date of invoice. In case of services, 1 year plus extension from the date of invoice in case of export of services. Within a period of next 15 days, whatever output tax you have not paid. Friends, do you remember? We are discussing 96A and not 96B. So 96A told you whatever output tax you have not paid, that output tax you will have to pay it voluntarily. You will have to pay it voluntarily. Whatever output tax you have not paid, you have to pay voluntarily with interest within a period of 15 days, failing which the department would directly recover the amount. The department is not going to issue you any show cause notice. The department is not going to issue you any show cause notice. The department is going to directly recover that amount from you. Please understand, we are discussing 96A. In 96A, after the time period, within a period of 15 days, you are supposed to pay the taxes along with interest. Which tax? The output tax which you did not pay, claiming the transaction to be a zero rated supply. Whatever output tax you have not paid, pay that back along with interest within a period of 15 days from the expiry of time which was given to you to prove it. Otherwise, the department has got all rights to directly recover the amount. This was the provision which was there in 96A. So now friends, as regards as 96B is concerned, does it speak about direct recovery? The answer is no. In 96B, the provision tells you that you are supposed to pay whatever refund which you have received, pay that back along with interest. First they give you voluntarily, you paid. Otherwise, the department would proceed to take action or initiate action in accordance with section 73, section 74. That means show cause notice would be given, demand order would be given, and only then the recovery proceedings would start. The department cannot directly attach your properties. This was the provision which is there in 96B. So friends, in 96B, is it a direct recovery or it is adjudication process? What do you mean by adjudication process? Show cause notice, representations, order, and even after order, if the assessee is not paying, then attaches bank account, attaches properties and recover the amount. What do you mean by direct recovery? No show cause notice, no representations, no order, directly recover the amount. Directly attaches bank accounts, directly attaches immovable properties or movable properties as the case may be. So friends, the question is, now we come back to our question. The question is, in case of 96B, is it a direct recovery or adjudication process? It is a adjudication process. The department would give you a show cause notice, there would be representation, there would be order, and only then, still if you do not pay, the department would attach your properties. So by following the due adjudication process, the amount is going to be recovered. 96B, does it say that it's not an export or it only restricts the refund? Friends, as we already discussed, 96B nowhere tells you. 96B nowhere tells you that this transaction, if the sale proceeds are not realized, it would be disregarded as an export. It is only restricting the refund. Whatever refund you have got, that you're supposed to repay that back to the government along with interest. The transaction is still a zero rated supply. The last aspect, friends, this would require your utmost concentration to understand. Is 96B wide enough? Now friends, please tell me, when does 96B apply? 96B would come into force, or 96B would operate only after I apply and receive a refund. Correct? 96B would come into force or would come into play only after I receive the refund. If I did not apply and receive the refund, 96B has got no role to play. Now friends, you may question that if I have made a zero rated supply, let's say under bond or LUT, if I have made a zero rated supply under bond or LUT, on my output, I wouldn't have paid any taxes. I obviously would have got certain input tax credit which gets accumulated. Please concentrate, friends. Now this accumulated input tax credit, I naturally would have applied for refund and I would have got a refund. Why would 96B not apply? Friends, please carefully understand and recollect. In case of a zero rated supply, please concentrate, friends. In case of a zero rated supply, which I have gone under bond or LUT, should I pay any output tax? The answer is no. Would I have any input tax credit? The answer is yes. Can it take that input tax credit? The answer is yes. Will that get accumulated? The answer is yes. Should I necessarily apply for a refund? Should I mandatorily apply for a refund? The answer is no. Then what would I do with that? If I am having any domestic supplies, I would offset this accumulated input tax credit against those domestic supplies. If I have any domestic supplies on which any output tax is payable, this input tax credit I can very well offset it against this domestic supplies. Now friends, let me talk about a scenario where there are two persons. This person makes an export of goods under bond LUT. This person makes an export of goods under bond or LUT, doesn't pay any output tax. He has got accumulated input tax credit. He applies for a refund of this accumulated input tax credit. He also receives the refund, but subsequently the sale proceeds are not realized and Reserve Bank of India also doesn't write it off. Whatever refund which he has received, is he liable to pay that back, the refund amount, to the government along with interest? The answer is yes. There are two persons. One, he is a pure exporter. He doesn't have any other transaction. Now we repeat the facts again. This person makes an export of goods under bond LUT. Yes. Receives inward supplies with taxes, input tax credit. Can he take it? The answer is yes. Can he apply for a refund? Yes. He receives the refund? Yes. Did he realize the sale proceeds? No. Whatever refund he has received, is he liable to pay that back to the government along with interest? Yes. Take this person. This person is not a pure exporter. He is an exporter as well as he has got domestic supplies. Now friends, he makes a zero rated supply of goods. He makes an export of goods under bond LUT. He makes an export of goods under bond LUT, doesn't pay any output tax. On his inward side, he might have some input tax credit. Yes. Can he take that? Yes. Is it mandatory for him to apply for a refund? No. What does he do? Does he have any output tax domestically? Yes. He offsets this input tax credit against this output tax, which means that whatever output tax is collecting from the customer, he doesn't pay to the government. He uses his accumulated input tax credit, pays that output tax, which means that this accumulated input tax credit, he is encashing it from the customer. This accumulated input tax credit, to the customer he would charge output tax and collect it. That collected output tax he would not pay to the government. He would use his accumulated input tax credit. So this person, whatever input tax credit is accumulated, he is encashing this from his customer. This person, whatever input tax credit was accumulated, he is encashing this from the government. Cash flow position wise, both are same. This person encashes accumulated input tax credit from the government. This person encashes accumulated input tax credit from his customer. Cash flow wise, both are same. But what is the risk which this person is carrying? Upon him, the sword of 96B is hanging. upon this person the sword of 96B is hanging, which means that if subsequently sale proceeds are not realized, whatever the refund which he has received from the government, that needs to be repaid back along with interest. But upon this person, there is no sword of 96B which is hanging, because he has not applied for any refund from the government. Cash flow wise, he collected from the customer, did not pay to the government, uses his input tax credit. But concept wise, he did not apply for any refund to the government, so therefore 96B is not applicable to him. This person carries a risk of 96B. So friends, is 96B wide enough? The answer is no. 96B is not wide enough because it doesn't cover those export of goods which is made under bond LUT, wherein input tax credit is accumulated and which is not applied as a refund from the government but encashed from the customer. In that case, 96B fails. It is not wide enough to cover this transaction. So friends, this is all about 96B. I am sure you're able to understand this. It is very, very simple. 96B simply tells you, you make an export of goods, either 16(3)(a) or 16(3)(b). You apply for refund, we would give you refund also. You have to ensure that you realize the sale proceeds within the time period which is allowed under FEMA plus extension. If you receive it, well and good. If you do not receive the sale proceeds, whatever refund which you have received, to the extent sale proceeds are not realized, you repay that back to the government along with interest. However, you need not repay this back to the government along with interest if Reserve Bank of India has permitted you to write off this debt, to write off this as a bad debt. If RBI has permitted you, then you need not repay it back. However, continuing further, subsequently, let's say you did not realize the export, you did not realize the sale proceeds, RBI also did not permit you to write it off. You repaid this back along with interest to the government. Subsequently, you realize the sale proceeds. So to the extent you have realized the sale proceeds, to that extent, whatever refund you have repaid back to the government along with interest whatever you have given, that amount the government will give it to you again. But you have to furnish a proof that you have realized the export proceeds or you have realized the sale proceeds within a period of 3 months from the date on which you realize the proceeds. This is all about 96B. Rest all what we have discussed, it was only for analyzing 96B in a much clearer manner. Now friends, this chart we have already discussed in the course of discussion itself. Let's have a brief difference between 96A and 96B. So now friends, as regards as 96A is concerned, what is the title? Export of goods or services under bond or LUT. 96B, it is recovery of refund of input tax credit which is unutilized or IGST paid on export of goods where export proceeds are not realized. What is the purpose? Friends, here the purpose is you claimed, in case of 96A, you claimed a transaction to be a zero rated supply. Why am I saying you claimed it to be a zero rated supply? Because you are yet to furnish the proof of it. Furnishing the proof would take some time. You claimed a transaction to be a zero rated supply. You did not pay any output tax. Eventually, if you are proving it, no issues. If you do not prove it, the output tax what you have not paid, claiming this transaction to be a zero rated supply, please pay that back along with interest. So the focus of 96A is on output tax. 96B, what is the focus of 96B? The focus of 96B is on refund of tax what is given to you. Whatever tax which is refunded to you, if the sale proceeds are not realized, you please give that amount back to the government along with interest. Applicability. 96A applies in case of zero rated supply of goods and services. And again, it covers both exports as well as supplies to special economic zone. So it covers all zero rated supply transactions. 96B, it covers only and only export of goods. It doesn't cover services. Even for goods, it doesn't cover supply of goods to special economic zone. It covers only export of goods. Time limit. For proving exports, in case of goods, they give you 3 months. In case of services, they give you 1 year plus extension. 96B, for realizing the sale proceeds, it is period allowed under FEMA. It is a period which is allowed under FEMA. And however, after you repay this back Let's suppose you do not realize this and you repay the amount back to the government. Subsequently, if you realize it, so subsequently you should realize it within what time? Within the time limit which is allowed under Reserve Bank of India. So two time limits, one is period allowed by FEMA, one is period allowed by Reserve Bank of India. Non-compliance. Friends, please understand this is very, very important. If you do not comply with 96A, which means that within 3 months or within 1 year plus extension, you do not prove this transaction to be an export of goods or export of services, non-compliance of 96A results into a transaction being disqualified as a zero rated supply. That means the transaction itself would not qualify as a zero rated supply and you would have to pay output tax. Please concentrate again. As regards as 96A is concerned, if you do not comply with this, the transaction itself will be disregarded as a zero rated supply and you would be asked to pay output tax. Output tax has to be paid. Non-compliance of 96B does not touch upon zero rated supply aspect at all. It simply tells you non-compliance of 96B, not realize the sale proceeds, whatever refund you have received, repay that back along with interest. So here it is still a zero rated supply. Refund received has to be repaid. Subsequent compliance. Now friends, as regards as 96B is concerned, first we'll take 96B. After you repay this back to the government, subsequently if you realize the sale proceeds within the time period allowed under RBI, then whatever amount you have repaid, that amount will be refunded back to you again. However friends, as regards as 96A is concerned, 96A is silent on subsequent compliance. 96A is silent on subsequent compliance. What do you mean by silent on subsequent compliance? Let's say in case of 96A, I make an export of goods today. Within a period of 3 months, I have to prove that it is an export. Otherwise, I'll have to pay the output tax which I have not paid. I make an export of goods. Within a period of 3 months, I'm not able to prove it. Within next 15 days, I should pay the output tax. I pay it. Subsequently, I prove that it is an export of goods. I bring the export general manifest. Whatever output tax which I have paid, can I claim a refund of that back? 96A is silent on this aspect. However, logically, you can apply a refund of that. The point which I wanted to highlight is 96B specifically speaks about subsequent compliance. 96A does not talk about subsequent compliance. Logically, it should be allowed. So friends, I'm sure, even though it was a lengthy discussion, I'm sure you're clear with 96A as well as 96B. Now friends, control over zero rated supply of goods. Where is the government trying to establish a control over zero rated supply of goods? In case of 96B, if you do not, in case of export of goods, we are only speaking about goods. We are only speaking about zero rated supply of goods. Where does the government have a control mechanism? In case of export of goods, if you do not realize the sale proceeds, whatever refund is given to you, the government can recover that back again. So this is one control mechanism which the government is having on export of goods. The second one is in case of zero rated supply of goods. That means export of goods as well as supplies of goods to special economic zone. In case of 89(4) clause C, there the government has restricted the value of exports to be 1.5 times of the domestic supplies, or the value of supplies which is made to SEZ to 1.5 times of the domestic supplies. So as regards as 89(4) C is concerned, here the valuation is limited to 1.5 times of domestic supplies. Accordingly, your refund would also be restricted if your value of supply, if your real value of supply is more than 1.5 times. So these are the two areas where the government is having a control over refund of zero rated supply of goods. The first one is only for export of goods. The second one is for entire zero rated supply of goods wherein you have gone under bond and LUT, and it is for the value will be restricted to 1.5 times the domestic value. Now friends, are there anomalies? Is there any issue? Is there any loophole in both these provisions? The answer is yes. Friends, as regards as 96B recovery is concerned, as we already discussed, as regards as 96B recovery is concerned, this 96B recovery would not happen if you did not apply for a refund, but you encashed the credit. You encashed the credit from your customer. Conceptually, cash flow wise, both these persons were same. The person who was a pure exporter, the person who was an exporter come domestic supplier, and he did not apply for a refund. Conceptually, cash flow wise, both were same, but however, this person is in an advantageous position as compared to this person because he did not apply for a refund from government. He encashed the credit from the customer. Is there any anomaly in 89.4C? The answer is yes. There is an anomaly in 89.4C as well. Please understand, 89.4C, the value is restricted to 1.5 times of the domestic supplies. Friends, 89.4C would come only when you are making a zero rated supply under bond or LUT. However, if you are making a zero rated supply on payment of IGST, 89.4C would never apply on you. Therefore, your value would not be restricted to 1.5 times the domestic supplies. So friends, here there are two anomalies which are there. 96B doesn't cover a person who has not applied for refund but encashed his credit from the customer. 89.4C, the anomaly is it doesn't cover exports or it doesn't cover zero rated supplies which are made on payment of IGST. Friends, the next amendment in the area of refund. Now friends, in order to understand this amendment, let's first take a case study. We'll be in a position to appreciate this amendment in a much better manner. Now friends, let's say there's a person, Mr. A, who's registered in GST. He's a registered person. Now in his electronic credit ledger, he has got a balance of 2 lakh rupees. He has got a balance of rupees 2 lakhs. Now he is neither making any zero rated supplies, that is, he is not engaged in export of goods or services, nor he is making any supplies to SEZ, nor his structure is inverted duty structure. He is neither having an inverted duty structure, nor is he making any zero rated supply. The reason why I am telling you of this fact is because only if a person who is making a zero rated supplies or he has got an inverted duty structure, he can apply for a refund of accumulated input tax credit. Other than these two reasons, there are no reason whatsoever that a person can apply for a refund from his electronic credit ledger. So now friends, this person, Mr. A, in his electronic credit ledger, he has got 2 lakh rupees. He also knows the fact that only for these two reasons, refund can be applied from electronic credit ledger. However, seeing 2 lakh rupees balance as an electronic credit ledger, he is not able to digest the fact that his working capital is getting blocked. So therefore, he decides about a plan to somehow encash this electronic credit ledger refund. So what it does is, friends, let's say in the month of July 2020, let's say his output tax liability is 1 lakh. His output tax liability is only 1 lakh. So therefore, friends, what actually should have happened, he would file his GSTR 3B. So actually he would file his GSTR 3B. He would say his output tax is 1 lakh. Already has got input tax credit in his electronic credit ledger to the extent of 2 lakh rupees. So 1 lakh rupee credit would be carried forward to the next month. This is what the normal process would have happened. Now friends, this person plans to encash his electronic credit ledger knowing the fact that other than these two reasons, refund is not possible. But however, what it does is in his GSTR 3B, friends, he says his output tax is 2 lakhs. In his GSTR 3B, he tells that his output tax is rupees 2 lakh. Friends, please understand, he has raised an invoice during the month. The invoices which has gone to his customers, what GSTR 1 he has filed, all those contain only 1 lakh rupees. Now friends, while filing his GSTR 3B, he says my output tax is 2 lakh rupees. Input tax credit which he has got is 2 lakh rupees. He pays nothing to the government from his electronic cash ledger. Also, there is no carry forward. Of any credit. Now friends, he goes to the government. He tells, look, these are the invoices. This is my GSTR 1 what I have filed. Everything has got an output tax of rupees 1 lakh. But however, while filing GSTR 3B, an articled assistant made a mistake and instead of 1 lakh, a typographical error, he punched it as 2 lakh rupees. So now friends, this is the error which has happened. This is what the person is telling. This is a manual error which has happened, that instead of 1 lakh, the tax liability in 3B is manually punched as 2 lakh. This is a human error which has occurred. So I have paid 1 lakh extra. You can verify from my documents. All my documents, my books of accounts tell me that output tax is only 1 lakh rupees. Due to error, I have paid excess tax to the extent of 1 lakh rupees. So therefore, give me a refund. Give me a refund of excess tax paid. Give me a refund of excess tax paid. Now friends, please understand, he is not asking a refund of his credit. He is asking a refund of wrong output tax paid. Had he asked a refund of his credit, the refund would have been denied because it is neither a zero rated supply nor this fellow is operating under inverted duty structure. Now friends, what refund is he asking? I paid excess output tax, grant me refund. So now friends, officer verifies the records and he finds it to be true. And he says refund processed. 1 lakh rupees comes to his bank account. 1 lakh rupee comes to the bank account of this registered person. Now friends, look at the scenario of this registered person. In his electronic credit ledger, he had an excess amount of, had he filed everything correctly, in his electronic credit ledger, 1 lakh rupees would have been carried forward. Now out of purpose, he deliberately made a mistake of misreporting the output tax liability to the extent of 2 lakh, calls it a human error, goes and applies for a refund of wrong or excess output tax paid, gets a refund of 1 lakh rupees in his bank account. So friends, what is the difference? The difference is in scenario number 1, 1 lakh rupees is lying in his electronic credit ledger. Scenario number 2, 1 lakh rupees has come to his bank account. So now friends, this way he has managed to unjustly get refund out of it. So now friends, the government noticed these transactions and of course they bought an amendment to struck this out. So now friends, the amendment tells you that to the proportion what you have paid from your cash ledger, that much of amount would come to your bank account. To the extent you have paid your liability from your credit ledger, wrong taxes paid what you are calling, to the extent or to the proportion what you have paid from your credit ledger, refund would be given. But this refund would be given to you as a recredit to your electronic credit ledger. This refund would be given to you as a refund to your electronic credit ledger. I would not give it to you in your bank account. The amendment doesn't tell you I will not give you refund. Refund is allowed to you, but in the proportion what you have paid from your cash ledger. So they would say cash ledger payments divided by total liability multiplied by the refund amount what you are asking. I repeat the formula again. Payments made through cash ledger divided it by total liability multiplied by the refund amount what you're asking. So much of proportion I'll give it in your bank account. The balance refund I would give it back as a recredit in your electronic credit ledger. So friends, this way the government has tried to arrest the misutilization of this provision which was happening. But friends, as we all know that any amendment which comes to arrest the malpractices which were happening, it in a way also impacts the genuine taxpayers. It in a way also impacts negatively the genuine taxpayers. So this refund which was there to arrest the malpractices, it does arrest the malpractices, but also it is impacting the genuine mistakes which have happened. I'll tell you how. Now friends, let's take this example. Say actual liability is 1 lakh. Declared, this is what we have just seen. Declared liability is 2 lakhs. He has paid by input tax credit 2 lakh rupees. Paid by cash nil. Refund prior to amendment 1 lakh rupees would go entirely in his bank account. That means when I say 1 lakh rupees is given as cash, it means 1 lakh rupees goes to his bank account. I could say 1 lakh rupees would go to his bank account. Refund post amendment. Post amendment, they would say that what is the total liability which you have discharged through cash ledger? So liability discharged by cash ledger divided by total liability multiplied by the refund amount. So much of amount I would give it to your bank account. The balance I would give it to you as a recredit in your electronic credit ledger. So now friends, this person has paid nothing by cash. He has literally paid nothing by cash. So it would be 0 divided by total liability is 2 lakh rupees. Total declared liability is 2 lakh rupees multiplied by the refund amount which is asking is 1 lakh rupees. So which is 0. So now friends, it is going to be 0 divided by 2 lakhs and multiplied by the refund amount what he is asking. So here it is going to be multiplied by refund amount which is asking, which is multiplied by 1 lakh. So here refund which would come to his bank account is going to be 0. So this is how By amendment, this malpractice is sought to be arrested by the government. And the balance refund would go to his electronic credit ledger. So out of the total refund applied 1 lakh rupees, nothing comes in his bank account. Everything comes back to his electronic credit ledger. So the position remains the same whether he has done this malpractice or doesn't do this malpractice. 1 lakh rupees would have been carried forward in his electronic credit ledger. Even by doing this, now also 1 lakh rupees will come back to his electronic credit ledger. Now friends, as we discussed, this amendment was there to arrest the malpractice which was happening, but this in a way is also going to affect the genuine taxpayers. Let's see how. Let's say a person has an actual liability of 1 lakh. A person has an actual liability of 1 lakh. However, due to genuine error, due to typographical error, he has punched the liability as 2 lakh in his GSTR 3B. Now friends, in his electronic credit ledger, he has a balance of only 1 lakh rupees. He has a balance of 1 lakh rupees in his electronic credit ledger. His actual liability is 1 lakh. He declared the liability as 2 lakh rupees in his GSTR 3B. Now friends, what would be the scenario? Paid by cash, it is going to be 1 lakh. Paid by cash is 1 lakh. When I say paid by cash, paid by electronic cash ledger, total liability 2 lakhs, which is declared in return. ITC 1 lakh is available. 1 lakh he has to pay through cash ledger. So he pays through cash ledger and then files his returns. Now friends, during the course of audit, it has been found out that the actual liability is 1 lakh, declared liability is 2 lakhs, 1 lakh rupees is paid in excess to the government. Now this is a genuine mistake which has happened with no intention of malpractice. 1 lakh rupees is excess paid from electronic cash ledger. Now friends, this person applies for a refund. He says, look at my invoices, look at my books of accounts, look at my GSTR 1 what I have reported. Everything tells my liability is 1 lakh. I have wrongly reported the liability as 2 lakh rupees. Give me a refund of 1 lakh rupees excess output tax paid. In the scenario of prior to amendment, he would have received 1 lakh rupees in his bank account. Now friends, post amendment. Post amendment, now friends, the amended rule tells you, the amended provision tells you that refund in your bank account would be according to a formula. What is the formula? The formula is liability paid from cash ledger divided by total liability multiplied by the refund amount which you have applied. So much of amount would go to your bank account. The balance would come to your credit ledger. So now friends, let's see. Here, how much would come in his bank account? In his bank account, 1 lakh rupees is the liability which is paid through cash ledger divided by total liability which is 2 lakhs multiplied by the refund amount applied which is 1 lakh. So he's going to say 1 lakh paid through cash ledger divided by total liability of 2 lakhs multiplied by the refund amount applied. So which works out to 50,000 rupees. So 50,000 rupees is going to go to the bank account and the balance refund amount is going to come to his electronic credit ledger. Now friends, look at this person's situation. As regards as this person is concerned, he has paid extra tax to the extent of 1 lakh rupees from his electronic cash ledger. When he asks for a refund of this, 50,000 goes to his bank account and 50,000 comes to his electronic credit ledger. 50,000 is coming to his electronic credit ledger. Now friends, this person's working capital is getting blocked because of this amendment. So friends, here this amendment which is there was originally there to arrest the malpractice. However, it is also impacting the genuine taxpayers, those persons who have genuinely done some typographical error. Now friends, having said this, this is all about this. Now let's go and analyze the rule. Rule number 92, order sanctioning the refund. Where upon examination of the application of refund of any amount paid as tax other than the refund of tax paid on zero rated supplies or deemed exports. Now friends, these wordings are very, very important. When does rule number 92 apply? Rule number 92 applies when in a case of refund of any amount which is paid as tax other than the refund of tax paid on zero rated supplies or deemed exports. So now friends, here rule number 92 would apply only when you are applying for a refund of output tax. Please understand, rule number 92, that means giving proportionate amount in your bank account and giving proportionate amount in your electronic credit ledger as a recredit. When can the department do this? The department can do this only when the assessee or only when the registered person is claiming a refund of his output tax. If the registered person is claiming a refund of his accumulated input tax credit, the department cannot give him as a recredit in his electronic credit ledger because the whole purpose itself is not served. That person, that registered person wants a refund from his electronic credit ledger, and again you're recrediting his electronic credit ledger itself. It makes no sense. So therefore, in case of zero rated supplies and in case of inverted duty structure, if you're applying for a refund of accumulated input tax credit, rule number 92, of course, is not going to restrict your refund as to how much should go to your bank account and how much would come to your electronic credit ledger. Rule number 92's application would come only when you're asking for a refund of your output tax. So that is where the malpractice was happening in case of refund of output tax. So rule number 92 also will apply only when an applicant is claiming a refund of an amount paid as tax. That means as output tax. If the applicant is asking for a refund of output tax, rule number 92 will come into force. And even in those cases, if the applicant is claiming a refund of zero rated supplies or deemed exports, rule number 92 would not come. Let's suppose I'm a registered person who is making a zero rated supply, on payment of IGST. Now, when I've made a zero rated supply on payment of IGST, am I claiming a refund of any amount paid as tax? The answer is yes. But is it again zero rated supplies? Yes. Now, if the government is applying rule number 92 and giving me only a portion in my bank account and a portion in my electronic credit ledger, this defeats the purpose of zero rating. So friends, now 2 points one needs to remember. Rule number 92 would come into play only when refund of output tax is being claimed. If refund of accumulated input tax credit in case of inverted duty structure or zero rated supplies under section 16(3)(a) is being claimed, rule number 92 would not even come into the picture. Point number 1. Point number 2, even in case of when an applicant is asking for refund of output tax paid, if it is in relation to zero rated supplies or deemed exports, rule number 92 would not come, which means that the entire amount which is applied as refund, if found eligible, it would go to the bank account of the registered person. So friends, having understood the background, now when an applicant is asking for a refund of any amount which is paid as tax, which means is asking for a refund of output tax, and it is not a zero rated supply, neither it is a deemed export, then the refund would come into two different portions. The government would first find out how much is the amount which should come to your bank account. The balance amount would go as a recredit to your electronic credit ledger. So now friends, it tells you the proper officer is satisfied that the refund is due, then he would sanction the amount of refund to be paid in cash, and the balance amount refundable would go as a recredit to your electronic credit ledger. Now, how much would come in cash? They say in cash proportionate to the amount which is debited in cash against the total amount paid for discharging the tax liability for the relevant period. So friends, they're giving a formula over here. They say what is the amount which you have paid from cash ledger divided by total liability multiplied by refund amount claimed. So much of amount would go to your bank account. So much of amount would go to your bank account, and the balance amount would come as a recredit to your electronic credit ledger. So in cash proportionate to the amount which is debited in cash against the total amount paid for discharging the tax liability for the relevant period, mentioning therein the amount adjusted against any outstanding demand under the act or under any other existing law. Now friends, here the wordings which are there, they tell you that first they will find out how much should come to your bank account. The balance would go to your electronic credit ledger as per the second part which we are yet to see. Please understand friends, here the government has acted in a very smart manner. The government says first we will find out how much should come to your bank account using the formula. The balance amount of refund would go to your electronic credit ledger. Let's say out of 1 lakh rupees, 40,000 rupees should come to your bank account, 60,000 rupees should go to your electronic credit ledger according to the formula which is given. Now friends, the government says that out of the amount which should come to your bank account, we would adjust any outstanding due which the registered person is having. Let's say the registered person some old outstanding which is there against demand order. Let's say it is some 10,000 rupees. Friends, the facts are 1 lakh rupees is the refund which is applied. According to the formula, 40,000 rupees should come into the bank account, 60,000 rupees should go to the electronic credit ledger. Parallelly, this person has some 10,000 rupees outstanding demand order, which still this person has not paid. Now the government says that against this refund, we would adjust the outstanding arrears. So far so good. The government is well within its right to adjust the arrears against the refund which is due to the assessee. But what injustice the government has done is, by this provision, the government tells this 10,000 which is outstanding, it tells that I will adjust this against the amount which should come to your bank account. I would adjust this amount against the amount which should come to your bank account. So friends, now the scenario would be from 40,000, 10,000 would be reduced and 30,000 would come to your bank account. 60,000 would go as a recredit to electronic credit ledger. Now friends, here the government has acted very smartly and this is injustice which is being done. The reason why I am saying injustice is being done is because, friends, please understand the outstanding demand which is there. The outstanding demand of 10,000 rupees which is there, the assessee could very well pay it from his electronic credit ledger itself. Any outstanding demand which is there, we are talking about the tax portion, could be paid from the electronic credit ledger by filing DRC 03. So now friends, when the assessee has an option to pay an outstanding demand from his electronic credit ledger, why should the government deduct this only against the cash element? So this would again block the working capital of the assessee. Now friends, understand, see, totally 10,000 should be adjusted, we are not disputing that. But why is only 10,000 being adjusted against that portion which should come to the bank account? Here the government doesn't want its working capital to be affected at the cost of working capital of the assessee. So friends, please understand this amendment. As regards as this amendment is concerned, here this amendment was introduced to arrest the malpractices of encashing the credit ledger amount. Agreed. However, this amendment has resulted into a genuine hardships for the genuine mistakes which happened. And also, by this amendment, now the government is doing injustice by adjusting the outstanding arrears only against the amount which should go to the bank account of the assessee. Rather, the government could have very well told that 40,000 rupees would go to your bank account, 60,000 which should going to come as a recredit in your electronic credit ledger, this 10,000 rupees outstanding due, I would adjust it over there, recredit I would give you only 50,000 rupees. By this, the working capital of the assessee would have been in a much better position. So friends, this is the injustice which is being done. Here, the government says I would adjust this amount, adjust this arrears either under the existing law or of the old laws against the cash portion alone. That means that amount which should go to your bank account, the government is going to adjust it. The balance amount refundable, and for the remaining amount which has been debited from the electronic credit ledger for making the payment of such tax, the proper officer shall issue form PMT 03 recrediting the said amount as input tax credit in the electronic credit ledger. So friends, I am sure you are clear with this. Rule number 86 also has been parallelly amended, wherein it says that where a registered person has claimed refund of any amount paid as tax wrongly paid or paid in excess for which debit has been made from the electronic credit ledger, the said amount, if found admissible, shall be recredited to the electronic credit ledger. So rule number 86, which speaks about debits and credits in electronic credit ledger, it talks about that portion which as a result of rule number 92 would come as a recredit in the electronic credit ledger. So friends, what is the injustice which is being done by this amendment? Here, the genuine mistakes which have happened, they also take a hit, because for them also what amount should have come to the bank account now would go to the credit ledger. They are losing on the working capital. Second thing, the government has smartly told that any outstanding dues which are there of the assessee, they would adjust it against the amount which should come to the bank account of the assessee rather than adjusting it against the electronic credit ledger recredit amount.
Subscribe to LearnCap and hit the bell icon to get notified.